Cool. Okay. So yeah, hey everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Ryan and I work at Prisma. Prisma is all about databases. And so we've got a few products that are all centered around giving you an easy and fun time working with databases, especially if you are working with TypeScript and Node. You may be familiar with Prisma from the old days. The old days were a couple of years ago when the company was originally called GraphCool, and it was a product that was basically like a hosted API and database for you that was all based on GraphQL. So you would create an account and you would have like a GraphQL API out of the box, essentially. And then it evolved into a different company name called Prisma, and it evolved to a different product. And the initial rendition of the product was still to do with GraphQL, and it was, but it was more so that you had to deploy your own server. Now, version 2 of Prisma is out. It's different again, so it's a bit of a pivot. But what we found is that people really want to have control over their databases and how they're accessed, and they really want to have tools to help them, but have a lot of control over the whole thing. And so now we've got what we think is a pretty good level of abstraction, which is a bunch of tools that give you really easy database access. So one of them is our Prisma client. You can get a fully type-safe client to access your database. You will find it very difficult to do the wrong thing with this Prisma client because it's totally type-safe, meaning that you can't put numbers where strings are supposed to go and vice versa. It tells you what fields belong in your database and all that. So really, really easy and fast to develop with, and it's it makes for a great time. So the world's moving to TypeScript and largely to GraphQL, and we've got this Prisma product. We've also got something that we've been working on for a while called Nexus, which is a way to write type-safe and code-first GraphQL APIs. And so I figured I'd show a little bit on how to construct one of those, how to get yourself wired up with an API that uses Prisma, uses Nexus, is totally type-safe, and can eventually feed into the story of type safety for the whole stack. And I think this is a key point that a lot of people are focusing on now, is because type safety helps. You could say it sort of slows you down a little bit at the outset because you've now got to worry about types, and you've got to annotate things with types, and you've got to worry about constructing interfaces and that sort of thing. But it's very helpful in the long run because later on, when you refactor your code and maybe you said you were going to make it look nicer and do certain things in a different way after you've put your product out, that time often doesn't come. Our code exists with technical debt often into the future. But if we can catch a lot of those potential problems with TypeScript out of the gates, then it makes for more maintainable code and a better product experience as time goes by. And so what Nexus does and why it's really nice in this regard is because it gives you type safety, but you don't have to do a whole lot of work to achieve it. It's going to give you basically everything you need for creating a type-safe GraphQL API. And it's going to auto-generate things for you. It's going to generate types, and you don't have to really worry about constructing interfaces and types and that sort of thing yourself. Same story goes for Prisma. It's a bunch of auto-generated stuff. So it's very cool, very, you can move very quickly with it, I would say. So this is what it looks like. This is if you're using Nexus. We've got some stuff being imported from @nexus/schema. We are making a schema. We've got this make schema object, which takes some types. And right now I've just got this single query type. So this is a root query type, and it's got some definition. It's saying that we want to have a field called hello, a string field called hello. This just resolves with a simple string called hello world. So I can go over to my GraphQL playground, and I can bump the size here, and I can say hello. If I hit go on that, there is that string. The idea here is that you don't need to write your schema definition language as one part and then your resolvers as another part. So if you're familiar with GraphQL, you're probably familiar, if you've written GraphQL servers, You're probably familiar that kind of the default way, if you will, is you write your schema definition language. It's this thing that is like this kind of this domain specific language. You would have something like a type of, query, for example, and then it would have this hello field. That would be a string. It's required, something like this. This would be schema definition language. And then you would need to write a resolver to actually have that resolve with some data. All of that takes place right here in the same code block, essentially. It's just all done in one shot. So it's nice because you don't have to switch back and forth between your SDL, your schema definition language, and your resolvers. So that is kind of a bit on what Nexus is all about. And I figure what we can do is create a little API here, maybe for blog posts. That's kind of the most popular thing that we kind of teach on when we're showing Prisma. So we joke internally that we're making a living writing blog applications these days. And what we do, if we want to get Prisma in the mix, is we need to install it. So let's do npm install. We need a dev dependency called @prisma/CLI. Prisma CLI, it is kind of what you think it would be. It's a CLI, it gives you commands to run and do Prisma things. We need that, and then, so that's a dev dependency. We'll just run that sort of locally here as a dev dependency. But we also need a regular dependency, which is going to be @prisma/client. We need the Prisma client, which is the basically it's the way that we're going to access our database to both read data and write data. So we've got those installed. What we can do is do npx prisma init. This is going to initialize Prisma in this project for us. And so when I did that, it creates this Prisma directory. And inside, I've got two things. I've got this .env file, and I've got schema.prisma with a lovely Prisma logo there. What is this file? .prisma files use the Prisma schema language, the PSL. So this is a domain-specific language, and it is the way that you create basically the map of your database. This is where you define your models. This is where you define how your tables take shape. You define multiple tables here, and you describe how they relate to one another. So this is the spot, this is the source of truth, basically, for the shape of your data, more or less. And you can see here, data source DB, provider is Postgres. We support, 4 databases right now, I believe. So there's Postgres, there's MySQL, there's SQLite. I think MS SQL is on the way. We don't delve into the NoSQL varieties like Mongo just yet. That's on the roadmap, but it's quite a different world. There's a lot of work to do to prepare ourselves to get towards that. Right now, it's all about relational databases. And so Postgres comes out of the box as it's configured here, but I'm going to switch up to do SQLite. SQLite basically looks like this. You just create something in your file system called whatever.db. So I've got dev.db. And so the URL I'm going to point to will be file dev.db. That's going to point over to this SQLite database. All right, so what do we do here to create a table? We can do model, and we'll create a post model. This is going to be for our blog application, let's say. The first thing I want is an ID field. So I describe my fields in here. I want an ID field, and I'm going to want a string. I'm going to want to put it as type string. So this is up to you. You can do it as like maybe an integer and have these auto increment if you want. I like to use some of the tools that come from Prisma to generate unique IDs. And the way that it looks is we want to set a default value, and we can use something like CUID. So that's a collision-resistant universal ID. The other option you've got is like a UUID for universal unique ID, but we got this collision-resistant one. We've got to mark this here as ID. We need a primary key field, and that's going to be our ID field here. So we've got ID. What else do we want? Title, I guess, right? Title is a string. We probably want a body for the post, and maybe that is enough for now. So I've saved this. I've got my definition for my post table. Now what we want to do is migrate our database. So that looks like this. We do npx Prisma migrate. We want to save. And then we've got to pass this experimental flag. And that's going to come off soon. Right now it's on just to let you know that this is subject to change, the way that this works. But, feel free to use it. Just, be aware that things could change. So the name of the migration, we'll call it init. And so that's one step. We also have to run another step for migrate here, which is up. We want to do migrate up. And when we do that, we've effectively got our database migrated. We've got our table in there. This looks like junk right here, of course. That's not going to give us a whole lot of value. But what we can do is run npx Prisma Studio. And Prisma Studio is really cool. It's basically a kind of a 21st century PHP MyAdmin. We can click into here. We can add records if we want to. My first post body, something like that. So it's definitely a really good client for your database access if you want to just jump in to see your tables, see what fields you've got in there, etc. So that's Prisma Studio. So we've got some data in our database now. Everything is wired up. If we want to get it out of our API, why don't we do this? We will import Prisma client from @Prisma client. And then we'll give ourselves an instance of that. Const Prisma equals a new Prisma client. And I was missing a step from before. The step that I was missing is that I need to do npx Prisma generate. And what's going to happen here when we generate the Prisma client, like I just did, is in node modules, in this .prisma directory, we are going to get a type defined for us. We've got this post type defined now based on what we have described in our .prisma file, that schema.prisma file. So the idea is that we are going to do all of the work necessary to generate types for your database access. And then what that looks like for you is if we go into server TS, on Prisma now, we can take a look at what we've got. We can do Prisma dot, and we've got some methods that are specific to Prisma. But we've got this field here called post. And this represents that post model that we created with Prisma. And if we do another dot, look at what we've got. We can find many, we can find one. We can do all of these database access things that we would want to do. So that's really cool. We get, like, for free, we get a ton of value because we are shown what we can do. And if we, so if we could do find many, for example. But if we wanted to do something like .find, if we're coming from, another database client world where there's just a .find method, it's not going to allow us to actually use that. So very cool. Why don't we do this? Let's make a Nexus type for ourselves. We'll call this post, and this is going to be an object type. So again, here we are, we're creating something with Nexus schema to give ourselves a GraphQL API. This is in replacement of writing this schema with the schema definition language and then writing a resolver. We're going to do it all in place here. We'll give it a name of post, and we'll give it some definition. And the definition will look like this. We'll have t.id, so that's going to be an ID field with the name of ID. We'll have t.string. We want a string field called title. And then we want t-string with body. That's going to be the definition for our posts. We'll want to make sure that we include it down here in our types array. So over here, we've got post. And now what we can do is on our main query, let's give ourselves a way to get the data out. So we can do t.field.list. We're going to say we want a list of things. We want to get posts. You know what? I think I've just made that backwards. t.list.field. There we go. We want to call this posts. And we will resolve with a type of post. And in the resolve method, we can do return Prisma post find many. Cool. So let's try that. Let's go over to our playground. So I'll just refresh to get the latest schema. And now what do we get? Posts. Let's go for ID, title, and body. And if I hit go, there it is. We've got one post in the database. We've got its ID. We've got all the other details for it. So very cool. So that gives us basically like super quick GraphQL API, really great way to access our database. We can find another method. We can see how another of these methods work. Let's take a look. We'll grab this ID. If we wanted to find one, for example, just find one post, we could do find one. We could say where, and then we could say we want to find it where the ID is equal to this ID. And I will take off the list property there so that now we're just going to resolve with that single post, and that's finding it by its ID. What I want to demonstrate here is if we tried to include something like, let's say we thought that our IDs were integers for whatever reason when we're developing our application. We are not going to be allowed to run that query because our type system knows that ID needs to be a string. So we can pass a string. That's going to pass the type checker, but we won't be able to put a number, for example. So, you know, type safety, really, really key feature here. And what's really great too is if we tried to, this wouldn't take place in this resolver, but if we were doing something like Prisma post create, you know, we can create a post, we can pass it some data. If we tried to include, you know, let's say we did title, right? Title is my second post. Body can be my second post body. So that completes the loop here for data. It's satisfied. If we try to include something else like author, for example, it won't let us do that. It knows what is expected for our database. And so what's great about this is if we have some developers working on the database and then others working on the API, it becomes very easy for them to communicate without even really communicating with one another. They can just use the type system to make sure that they are working in a way that is expected. So that's very cool. What I want to show maybe as we wrap up here is the way that you would generate types, that you can work with auto-generated stuff here for your schema. And what that looks like is this. On Nexus schema, we've got this option to do outputs. And there are two kinds of outputs that you might want to consider. There are types, so we want to do type generation. And there's also the schema, the GraphQL schema definition language. So why don't we start with that? So if we do this, we can say our schema. We just need to supply something here to tell it where to go, basically. And so let's see if I can remember how to do this. This might be dicey, but we can try that. While we're at it, maybe we'll just do the type gen as well. So schema is one thing, but type gen is another. So directory name generated and types dot ts, I guess, something like that. Let's save it. And what we should get now is automatically this generated directory. So let's talk about this schema.graphql. This is that schema definition language that we were talking about. This is typically the way you would come to write a GraphQL API. You get the artifact of what you've written here in Nexus schema, a Nexus schema way of creating a GraphQL API. You get the artifact of the schema definition language generated for you if you want it. And what's useful here is you can then plug this into your editor, for example, using GraphQL extensions. And that's going to then inform you when you're developing your front end, if you're developing in React or whatever, wherever you happen to be developing. You can use this SDL file to inform your front end developers on what they can query for. So now you've got a bunch of communication pieces between your database access, your API access, both in terms of like the back end and the front ends, and it ties the whole thing together really nicely. You've also got these types that are generated for you. So for example, we've got, let's do a search post. There we go. We've got this Nexus gen field types. Might be useful for you if you are wanting to apply these types elsewhere throughout your API. You know, you can make use of this as you see fit. So that kind of wraps up the little demo here. You know, maybe one thing we could just quickly do, I could show you maybe a mutation quickly just to wrap this all up. We can do const mutation. It's going to be mutation type. That's an import that comes from Nexus. And we can do, what can we do? Definition. And we will do t.fields. And let's call this create post. And let's define some arguments that are going to come in. We are going to want a title. That's going to be a string arg. So that's a function to execute. And we want a body too. That's a string arg as well. Then in our resolve function, we're going to get the parents, we're going to get the args and context, and then info if we wanted it. This is kind of standard if you're writing a GraphQL API. And what we want to do here is we want to insert this data into the database essentially. So let's grab this. I think we can just kind of use this directly. Return an empty array there just for now. Let's put this in here. We will paste that. I'm getting a lot of red here, which I am. Oh, we need a type post. There we go. That satisfies things. We've got this args object. We can pull title and body right off of there. And now we can just destructure that in. We should be good to go with that, I think. We'll return this. I think that's good. I want to put my mutation type in place here into the types array. We can take a look right away. We get this mutation with create post and the arguments. Oops, I just messed that up. Create post with the arguments that it expects and the return type, which is post. And we can have a play with that, I think. Getting some type errors. String is not assignable to undefined is not assignable. And I think that's because I have to say nullable is false, perhaps. Nullable, false. Perhaps not. Let's take a look. Not exactly sure why that's popping up, but anyway, let's try for a mutation. And it'll be create. I'm just gonna refresh to get my schema here. Create post. And what goes in here? Title, my third post. I'm getting a lot of this helper screen. That's not very helpful. And body, post, body, something like that. And we'll return with an ID, title, and body. Does this go? It looks like it goes. We've got an ID. If we head over to Prisma Studio and refresh that, there it is, my third post, which is actually the second post in the database, but you get the idea, I'm sure. Yeah, so that rounds it out, I think. Check out Nexus schema. Check out Prisma.io. We've actually got an event. It's our very, very first Prisma meetup. We do a number of meetups around GraphQL, around TypeScript, etc. This is the very first Prisma meetup on October 28th. So if you are interested in joining up for that, head over to Prisma.io. And yeah, I think that's about all I got. So happy to take questions now if anyone's got them.
We would applaud. So
thank you.
Good stuff. I would like to check out the meetup, and I'll share that link if that's okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
With group. So questions. Who has questions, comments? Are you guys hiring by any chance?
Prisma, you can check out, what is it? Let me find the link. I think it's just /jobs. Prisma.io/jobs. That's the one. Head over there. There's some open positions. What do I see? Developer advocate, engineering manager, and TypeScript engineer are the jobs up right now.
Beautiful.
Yeah, check it out.
Cool. Anyone have any questions? You can type them in chat or you can shout them out. Ryan, do you mind dropping some contact info in chat just in case anyone does want to reach out for you after the fact?
Yeah, so twitter.com/Ryan Chenkie. You can get me there. That's the best place. I mean, if you like email, I'd take an email from you. You can hit me there, Chenkie@prisma.io. Yeah, come say hi.